All right, this might have actually been one of the craziest events I have ever seen, and I think you will definitely want to hear about how it all went down. So with that, let's get into it. I think I'm not dedicated to this. I'm literally recording this in my parents' basement right before I'm flying to Germany for a week. So I am literally recording this in the middle of the night, knowing that I'm going to the airport in like 2 hours. So I'm getting basically zero sleep. So hopefully you dig this video. And if you want to dive straight into FPO or MPO, you can jump ahead to these timestamps. But before we get to that, let's talk about the course itself. And because we did have 4 rounds at Maple Hill, we luckily got some A and B pen positions, which I think really helped the course. It still just made everything just a little bit more lively. And speaking of lively, oh my goodness, the fans and crowd were insane. Starting on the first round on a Thursday, there were so many fans packed up at this course, making the energy levels extremely high. And this made every shot, every single moment insanely hype, but also had some very negative impacts on some players. Looking at you, Ezra, who got razzed like 3 times in the matter of 2 holes. I think it was round 2. But overall, I think this energy, much like in the European stretch, is what we need to have all these events feel so much more important, because all these shots really do matter. And when we have like 5 fans on a first round FPO card, you just don't get that feeling. So it was really nice to have the crowd show up like nobody else. And to go along with that energy, I think this course just cannot be understated how good it is. There are no shots that are luck shots. You can't really cheese this course at all. You can have a lot of power, but just not really perform well, because this course rewards accuracy and accuracy alone, which means even the best of the best, like a Ricky or a Gannon, can be playing really good and then just kind of falter, because there are so many shots where you hit an early tree and then you're just out of position. And unlike other courses, these tree hits are not really fluky. It is basically just you missing your line. And before we get to the last point, we had this major foot fault violation. I can't believe it happened. It is what it is. But the last point had to be commentary. There are so many things I could say positively. There are so many parts of commentary that I am sure I don't fully appreciate, but for whatever reason, this particular final round for both MPO and FPO, I was just left feeling so annoyed, and I don't know if I'm feeling burnout or if it's just the hater in me, but I was really getting bothered by Terry's constant pessimism with Kristin. It felt like it was happening again and again, where every single moment Kristin faltered, he would just jump on that, and every time Missy had a good shot, he would jump on that, and it really felt like favoritism in a way that I don't love, and I didn't really feel like it added anything to the coverage. And to go along with that, I feel like every 5 minutes they kept bringing up the 20th place for the Pro Tour standings, and like, I get this has some amount of importance, but for me as a fan and for basically everybody else, no one else truly cares. And I could be wrong, maybe everyone listening does care, but for me, if you get just enough points to make the Pro Tour championship, like, good on you, but for me personally, I just don't care. So the fact that they kept bringing it up made it really hard to stay engaged, because I just felt like so many of the shots that we saw were just not impactful, and it felt like we're getting hammered again and again over something that feels so trivial. And this was brought up again when every single person on the top 4, top 3 of the Pro Tour standings had to give like a weird speech, and I feel like Calvin said the perfect thing, because it encapsulated basically exactly what I was feeling.
I got nothing really, but I'd like to thank the Pro Tour for, putting on another great season, and can't wait to see what they put together next year.
And then on MPO, it was honestly just so hyped that it was hard to get wrapped up in negative things about commentary, but I do feel like DOS is continually bringing up these what ifs and these possible scenarios about what could have happened, and overall, I just don't care once again. But with that, let's get into FPO, but I guarantee you want to stay for MPO because it was insane. So overall, Owen was playing pretty good the entire weekend, except for one fatal flaw that I really cannot believe is almost starting to become a trend, and that was her C2 putting. She went 1 for 7, 2 for 6, 2 for 9, and finished the final round 1 for 8 from circle 2. So with that, she went 6 for 30 from circle 2. I know Owen is a better player than that, and if she could have just made a couple more, she would have definitely dominated this event, but that is not the world we live in, and she finishes in 3rd place. Respectable, but I think ultimately she could have done so much better. Next up, Paige honestly was looking fire the entire final round, and I felt like this was the confident Paige we've been waiting for the last couple of years. Despite finishing the last 2 holes with bogey, I feel like this is the best finish we've seen, and I do want to see a world where Paige and Kristin are really battling again and again, because we have not truly seen that much in this current era. And speaking of Kristin, it was basically a neck and neck race between Kristin and Missy. And you probably would not have guessed that if you were just looking at scores at the end of round 3, because Missy was behind by 3 strokes. Looking shaky basically the entire weekend, especially on putting. I really don't know what it is, but with this lack of confidence on putting, this is where Missy really came to shine, making it a much more interesting battle than I would have thought. And it all started in hole 5, where Kristin goes first available tree hit right into the water, carding a bogey, and Missy pops off after that with a birdie, birdie follow-up. And after that, it was like, okay, we have a real battle where Missy may just win this. But with that said, the back nine for Kristin has been her bread and butter, and despite her lack of confidence, she is still probably the favorite to win this. And some minor spoilers here, but she went 11 for 14 from C1 and 2 for 6 from C2, which honestly sounds pretty good. But she left a lot of strokes out there, especially on the putting. I think for so many putts, it was just a little bit too far right or a little bit short. There was very few hard misses. It felt like it was just 1 inch off, and if she had another chance to make those putts, she probably would have made it. But again, that is not the world we live in, and on hole 14, with both of them being tied, Kristin is basically parked, and then Missy does this, just maybe trying a little bit too hard to get really close to the basket, and she goes just a little bit too far short, turning a relatively easy par into a bogey at potentially the worst point in the round, because it really felt like momentum was going straight for Missy. And then they followed that up with an amazing back-to-back park job on hole 15, and so we get to hole 17, which is kind of like that point in the round where everybody could get birdies, but it is by no means an easy birdie, and Kristin, being out of position, basically just has to pitch up for a par, and Missy is left with this 40-footer, basically the most death of a death putt you could possibly get, because if she does miss, it is probably going down the hill another like 40 feet, and at that point you can pretty much just counter out. But then she does this.
I've got chills, Terry.
Absolutely cold-blooded in a point in the round where there were so many nerves. I think Kristin was feeling the nerves, but Big Money Missy steps up and turns a 2-stroke deficit into a tie game, because lo and behold, Kristin misses the 20-footer par save. It was absolutely crazy, but then we move on to hole 18, where they are both left with basically the exact same upshot. And remember, we have seen so many players flub this upshot, so even though it may seem easy to us, it is by no means easy, and when you have all those fans circling around you, there's probably so many nerves. But with Kristin up first, this is what happens. Just maybe not committed enough, it's hard to say, but she goes out of bounds, leaving Missy with a very gettable but kind of tough forehand approach, and then she nails it. With a forehand that we do not see much on tour, it is very evident this is not a strong point for her, but it does not matter. She gets within 20 feet and secures the win in the first place in the Pro Tour points, which again, I don't really care about, but people do care, so I had to note it. And here's what she had to say.
I am feeling so overwhelmed with just joy, and I'm, in the last couple of weeks, I felt like I was kind of losing myself a little bit on the green, and I still had that struggle this week, but today I turned it around, and I told myself this morning that I'm jumping in that pond. I don't care what it takes. I'm jumping in that pond. I knew I had to make it. There was nothing else on my mind. I told myself I wasn't going to let that happen again. I got to make the putt. That was the only thing on my mind, and the fact that I just sent it right into the heart just felt so good. I said the last few weeks have just felt really weird. I think ever since I got back from Europe, I don't know, I just felt like I was kind of sitting in that 5th, 6th place spot every event, and I couldn't get out of it.
And honestly, for me, I have so many mixed emotions about this, because obviously she did a great thing. She worked so hard in this final round to secure this win, and she had a lot of phenomenal putts. But once again, I felt like all the power really resided in Kristin. I felt like at so many moments, she just kind of gave up and was frazzled and missed putts that we know she's capable of making, and she did make a lot of good putts. But I think her confidence and overall flow in the game is just not there, which is crazy because she basically won it, just had one OB, putting her in 2nd place. But I think like everyone else on tour, Kristin just needs some time to decompress and rebuild her confidence after everything that happened this past season. But with that, Missy wins $10,000, and I'm pretty sure this stat is right, but this marks the 7th out of 41 wins that Missy has over Kristin. Kind of crazy, but this just shows how dominant Kristin truly is. If you have been looking for a great disc golf shoe, look no further than Vessey's Stormburst. With breathable, waterproof fabric, these will certainly give you a great disc golf experience. And if you're like me and love a great deal, go to Vessey.com/wildruns to save 15% off your order for new customers. And with that, we move on to MPO. And MPO was insane. I think so many players just kind of laid an egg in the final round, and these are players that were leading. It is crazy that this all went down the way that it did, but starting off with some players that weren't really in contention, but were kind of in contention. Ezra Robinson was destroying in the first couple of rounds, but then just kind of fell off, and I really don't know what to equate it to. But in a very similar vein, Corey Ellis did the same, even though he finished his second round with 11 under and went 6 under through 6 in the final round, but just couldn't keep it all together and finishes in 10th place, which was just enough to finish in 20th place for the Pro Tour Championship. And even though these two players were in contention, it didn't really feel like it in the back half of the final round, so I'm going to be spoiling it a little bit. Gannon and Ricky, even though they were leading after round 3, basically just fell apart in almost unison, because it really felt like when one player was going to bogey, the other player bogeyed, and they both just kind of fell apart, which is very uncharacteristic for both of them. But again, this could just be burnout, it's hard to say. So Gannon cards 3 OBs and 4 missed circle 2 putts, and Ricky cards 4 bogeys. So even though they kind of fell apart, they both finished in third place. But honestly, if you were just watching the first couple of holes, you would probably say, oh yeah, Ricky probably ran away with it, but that was just not how it ended up. And another player that finished third place, because this was just the event where everybody finished in third place, we have Gavin Babcock, tying his best finish of all time, with the last one being third place at Des Moines Challenge last year. Just a phenomenal finish for him. And honestly, if things shook out just a little bit differently, I could definitely see a world where he would win this. But a player that did not really fight for the win, Simon Lizotte, who has won this in the past, and this is kind of his home course. And again, just like other players, I'm sure he's pretty burnt out in the season, but he finishes his final round with a 973 rated round and finishes his last 5 holes at 5 over, which is just brutal. But the players that were really in contention were James Proctor and Aaron Gossage. Now we know James has the potential to win. He obviously won in Europe, which was a major milestone for him, but I think so many people have asterisks on that because the competition was much less. So I would say everyone really does think of him as still not really getting a true win. And watching this final round, I knew James was destroying. I knew he was playing well, but I was like, yeah, he's just probably not close enough to really be in contention. But that was before Gannon and Ricky just kind of fell apart. So as he was climbing and climbing, Gossage was lighting it up as well. But if you're watching coverage, you probably would not have noticed because so many holes he was having probably one of the worst bouts of just judgy vibes, really feeling down on himself and outwardly projecting so much negativity. And I can only imagine how much like bad stuff that does for his game. So if I were him, I would definitely recommend going to a sports psychologist. But even with that said, he still had so many phenomenal drives. And despite missing all 4 of his circle 2 putts, he makes 13 for 14 from circle 1, which if you are familiar with Gossage, I would say that is really good. So throughout the entire front 9, every time Rick was doing well, James and Gossage were matching those shots. And hole 9 was that tipping point where Rick goes OB and then James absolutely crushes it for an easy birdie. And then immediately following that, he cards another birdie, putting him within 1 stroke of Rick. And then despite Ricky following that up with a 45-footer on hole 11, Aaron and James cash another birdie, with James securing a 40-footer, showing that his prowess on putting is equal if not better than Rick. But then the real nail in the coffin was when Rick went OB on 14. And then yet again, James secures another dominant putt for a birdie. And it becomes clear, all right, if James can just execute his drives, he will almost certainly win this. But right as that was happening, a sneaky little player, Paul Macbeth, is playing lights out from third card. And if you are not familiar, which I almost feel like this isn't true, but people said it, so I have to believe it is true, nobody has won from third card. And Paul finishes his last 6 holes going birdie on every one of those last 6 holes. So he goes 11 under on the round with a finish of 28 under and a round rating of 1084. So at that point, when all the top contenders were falling apart, it looked like maybe Paul will win this, which is insane, but it definitely felt like a possibility. But yet again, James just kept draining his putts again and again and absolutely crushing every drive. And despite Gannon and Ricky following that up with some great putts, ultimately it just didn't really matter. And even though Gossage was playing generally pretty good, he was just a couple of strokes too far behind to really be fighting for the win. So then we move on to hole 18. James was basically only concerned about birdie or par. And again, much like FPO, with a very gettable upshot opportunity, it feels easy, it feels like anybody could do it, but then he goes out of bounds. And if you are Ali Smith, the caddy, I have to imagine you're telling him, like, maybe don't run it, maybe just play for the intentional bogey because it just doesn't matter, like you'll still get the win. But it's hard to say. Maybe the upshot doesn't line up, so you have to run it. It's hard to say. But with Gossage being out and Paul being 2 strokes behind, if James can just nail this putt for a bogey, he will secure the win. But this drop zone putt is by no means an easy putt. It's gettable, but definitely not easy. And then he does this.
James Proctor! Oh my God.
Only the stuff of legends, and only a truly dominant beast of a putter could nail this putt, and that is exactly what James Proctor does. It is officially Proctology season, netting 2 wins on the season. I am so excited for James. I actually did an interview with him like 2 years ago, and he is just such a stand-up guy. There is basically nothing bad you could say about him, and I am so excited for him that he was able to show everybody, yes, I can win when there is competition. And what's even crazier is that he did not know the scores. He basically only knew that he had to make this putt to win. But besides that, I think we're left to believe he really did not know what scores were and what the importance of every shot was going to be. So here's what he had to say after he just won $15,000 in his first real Pro Tour win.
I had no idea what the scores were. I asked Allie what happens if I make the putt. She said you win. I said, all right, let's do it. And the rest is history. Actually, after the second shot, I'm thinking, you know, of course, it's an island hole that I'm not historically good at. So I mean, this is number one. It hasn't set in yet. I'll have a better answer for you tomorrow, but right now it feels pretty good.
So honestly, what a crazy finish. I'm so excited for James and definitely excited for Missy as well, but I cannot state how hype of a putt that was to secure the win for Proctor. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'm very appreciative for everybody that's followed along this entire Pro Tour season. It is coming to a close with just a couple events left. And I gotta say, I have a lot of fun stuff planned, but I also think there's a lot of change coming. So I really appreciate everybody that has followed along with this journey. It really means the world to me. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to check out Wysocki. So with that, Wild Runs, signing out. Peace.
Beth at 69.
I just told myself, you got to will this one in there. Whatever you have, just will it in there.
This man is unbelievable. This is what athletes live for. This is the moment.